Replication lag we already covered. Essentially, this is the one related to how much lag is acceptable. I think we settled on 240 seconds originally for the alert. So we've kind of gone over that one already. Number 3 is connections. Now we're running through our list of previous criteria. It's quite important here. We want to know what our normal levels of connections are before we can alert and decide what's abnormal. We don't want to create too many false positives, so you're going to want to look at your connection levels over time, and perhaps again, as with replication lag, maybe you want to go into the level of having a warning alert, a critical alert, that kind of thing. So how would you kind of make that decision? For normal, you can just look at the graphs over time. Have a look at your hosts that you're going to set this alert up on in MMS and determine what is the normal level of connections that they actually have. And this can be radically different depending on the host itself, of course, right? So here's where setting up the alerts for primary or secondary or MongoOS are certainly going to come into the equation. Your primary may be where you read from the most of the time, maybe where you write to, and you've got your secondaries there purely as a data redundancy exercise. So they're taking very few connections. Really, the only thing that's hitting them is maybe some monitoring traffic and the actual replication process itself. So they'll have a very low number of connections. Whereas your primary might be running with multiple hundreds, maybe even thousands of connections. So you really do need to know what the normal level is for each type of process that you're going to alert on. And then you're going to need to decide what worrying is. Now, I've put in 3x as a potential example here. If you had 1,000 connections normally on a MongoOS, for example, and it went up to 3,000, you'd probably want to know why. That could mean that things are getting backed up. It could mean that maybe someone's added a new layer of application servers. There could be multiple reasons in there for that kind of increase. And then the critical part. Is there an absolute limit to the amount of connections that you're going to use here? The answer actually is surprisingly yes. There is an absolute limit. And this is part of how connections are handled in Linux and in MongoDB. There is an absolute limit here, and it is either your ulimit, which we covered earlier in terms of resolving an issue with ulimits on an MMS monitored host, or it could be that you're running into the hard-coded limit on MongoDB itself, which is 20,000. That would be quite rare. Or the final limit is memory. This will be covered in more detail later on, but essentially, one connection means 1 meg of memory used. So if you've got 20,000 connections, that's 20 gigs of memory potentially that you're using. That's an awful lot of memory to be consumed, particularly for a database, to be consumed at the connection level. So you probably want to set your critical level to some significant percentage of this, but definitely lower than before you actually run into the limits themselves. You got a primary level here, 10,000 is your critical alert. Secondaries can have up to 500 connections, and after that you want to see what might be going on. Maybe somebody is running some analytics against your secondaries that you weren't aware of, but generally you're not going to expect to see that level of connection on your secondary, so you want to know about it if and when it happens. And then the MongoOSs, you can imagine if you have 100 MongoOSs, then that would give you 20,000 total connections here, and that could be overwhelming the primary. So you might want to get an early warning here in terms of the actual MongoOS themselves and set a 200 connection level there too. So for the first time when we're configuring this alert, just do it as an example with connections, we're going to use the MongoOS example. And in this case, we're going to select MongoOS, and then we're going to scroll down and look for connections. We'll leave it on any MongoOS host. Again, you may have one here that you use for only administrative purposes, or perhaps there's one that you use for load testing and you want it to be exempt from the 200. But generally we just leave this for any MongoOS host. I think we'll leave this as a non-waiting alert, and we'll get an alert every 5 minutes until it resolves itself via email. So let's save that. So here we have it. Host type MongoOS, connections above 200. I won't go into doing the primaries and secondaries, but you can imagine it's a very, very similar process. Pick out the levels, add them in, decide your frequency and how long you want to wait.